So Trump has picked a new Supreme Court justice. Let's talk about this. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think it's time for the Supreme Court to take some sort of action on the Second Amendment and pick up a Second Amendment case, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I'm going to give a big shout out to one of the main sponsors of the channel, and that is Franklin Armory. Franklin Armory has shown me and this channel a lot of support, and I cannot thank them enough for that, as well as they have various products out on the market like 3 California compliant AR pistols. They also were attempting to sell the Title I to California residents like us, as well as they have other products out on the market for people in free states like the binary trigger. So Franklin Armory is an amazing company. They showed me and this channel a lot of support. So go over to their social media accounts, go over to the website and show them support. And I cannot thank them enough for what they have done for this channel. So this Saturday, Trump announced that he is nominating Amy Coney Barrett as the new replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court. If you watched my last video talking about Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing and some of the discussion that was leading up to this nomination, I was actually very much in favor of Amy Coney Barrett. I thought she was probably one of the best options. And when you look at about what Trump was talking about leading up to the nomination, saying that he wanted to appoint a new female justice to the Supreme Court, as well as you look at the track record where Amy Coney Barrett was already on a list prior to be an individual to be put on the Supreme Court, I thought it was very likely that Trump would pick her as the replacement, and we found out Saturday that that is the fact, that Amy Coney Barrett is nominated to fill Ruth Bader Ginsburg's place on the Supreme Court. So a lot of you have asked my opinions about Amy Coney Barrett and what I think she will do as far as on the Supreme Court when potentially Second Amendment cases come before the Supreme Court, or whether I think she will have an impact on the Supreme Court in getting Second Amendment cases heard. So first, I think absolutely that it is likely now that you have more conservative justices on the Supreme Court, more constitutional justices on the Supreme Court, it is much more likely that you will see Second Amendment cases finally being heard. Prior to Ruth Bader Ginsburg's passing, we did have a lean in favor of conservatives, a 5-4, but the issue was Justice Roberts because he was kind of that swing vote. And so really it was more of a 4-4 split with Roberts kind of being in the middle and not knowing exactly what he was going to do. But now with Amy Coney Barrett being put on the Supreme Court, it is much more likely that there will be no contest if the Supreme Court and the other justices decide they want to take up a Second Amendment case. And if you take what some of the justices have said very recently in the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association case when they kicked that for being moot, they were saying that it will be soon that the Supreme Court needs to take up and hear these Second Amendment cases. So if you take them for at their word, it might be very soon that once Amy Coney Barrett, if she does get placed on the Supreme Court, if she is confirmed and she gets to serve on the Supreme Court, it is very likely that they will now decide that it's time to hear these Second Amendment cases. So what impact will Amy Coney Barrett have on these Second Amendment cases? So first and foremost, I want to note that she was a clerk for Antonin Scalia. Many of you are familiar with Antonin Scalia because he is kind of the pinnacle of originalist textualist interpretation on the Supreme Court, and he issued the very critical and important Second Amendment case, Heller v. DC. So he has set the standard for what we are playing under now as far as the Second Amendment. And he is the one who found that the Second Amendment and the individual's core fundamental right to self-defense is protected under the Second Amendment. And he found that DC's restrictions on handguns violated the Second Amendment, and that was the Heller case. So Antonin Scalia was that individual, and he was the individual who really took up these Second Amendment issues. And Amy Coney Barrett clerked under this great individual. And she has said it herself multiple times that she has taken on his originalist textualist views of Antonin Scalia. Like, she has adopted those from being his clerk. So it is very likely that she will interpret things very much like he did, and we will have much more of a true replacement of Antonin Scalia on the Supreme Court. Now, no one can replace Antonin Scalia because he was kind of the pinnacle, same way that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the pinnacle for her ideology. But it is nice that we get someone kind of a la Scalia back on the Supreme Court. So that's a positive for thinking that maybe she will rule, in a very positive way for our Second Amendment rights if she's on the Supreme Court. Another potential positive when you look at Amy Coney Barrett has to do with her dissent in a 7th District court decision. In the Cantor case in the 7th District, Amy Coney Barrett wrote a dissent opinion. And that Cantor case dealt with, I believe it was a Wisconsin statute, which dealt with a felon's individual to lawfully possess firearms and whether these felons were prohibited from being in possession of firearms. In her dissent, Amy Coney Barrett essentially said that if an individual is a non-violent felon, they should be able to have their fundamental Second Amendment rights and they should not be prohibited from having firearms. But if they are a violent felon, then that would fall within specific regulations that historically, textually, and originally were interpreted to essentially prevent individuals from having firearms. So really, this is the only decision we have specifically from Amy Coney Barrett dealing with the Second Amendment. But when you read her dissent in that Cantor case, it is very clear that she thinks kind of like Scalia. And also, she kind of thinks like Justice Kavanaugh, and many of you are familiar with Justice Kavanaugh because of what happened with him being nominated for the Supreme Court. But Justice Kavanaugh sat on the District of Columbia's appeals court, and he was originally the one that heard the Heller v. DC case. And he wrote a very interesting dissent when he was sitting on the DC court. And in his dissent, he talked about that these fundamental constitutional and Second Amendment issues should not be heard based on levels of scrutiny. And many of you are familiar with levels of scrutiny where something that affects core fundamental Second Amendment rights have to be heard under strict scrutiny. And it appears from both Justice Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett that they believe that levels of scrutiny really shouldn't be at play when you look at the Second Amendment. Instead, the determination of whether a various state's statute or regulation or restriction violates an individual's core Second Amendment rights should be a look at the text, history, and tradition at the time that the Second Amendment was written. It shouldn't be whether this government agency has a compelling governmental interest that is narrowly tailored. And so the standard really shouldn't be looking at the levels of scrutiny. It should be instead looking at the text, history, and tradition of the Constitution of the Second Amendment at the time that it was written. And so this is a much harder bar for example, the state of California to meet, because when you look at the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment, it would be very hard for the state like Javier Becerra to argue that there was magazine restrictions or ammunition restrictions or anything like that. It is a much harder bar for essentially them to get over. So the text, history, and tradition standard is much harder for the state or any state or the federal government to get over. So if those sorts of standards are used instead of levels of scrutiny, it is very likely that we could get a slew of very favorable Second Amendment cases. Now, this is all speculation because we don't really know what case the Supreme Court would hear and exactly how they would rule. And we don't even know if Amy Coney Barrett is actually going to get confirmed to be on the Supreme Court, because who knows with what's going on right now in 2020, what's going to happen, what's going to come up, people from one side saying something else. So we don't really know, but all we know right now is that Trump has nominated Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court, and she is seeking confirmation from the Senate. Also, Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearing date is going to start October 12th before the Senate. So that is the date we are looking at for her actual confirmation hearing. So all in all, I am happy with Trump's nomination. I think Amy Coney Barrett is a great selection. A lot of people don't really like some of her religious views or some of her religious comments, things like that, but it doesn't personally bother me. And really, for the purposes of this channel and the purposes of talking about the Second Amendment, I think it is a great nomination. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and comment down below and I'll try to answer those to the best of my ability. Also, if you like this video and you like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is join the Patreon page, and I'll put a link down below to the Patreon page. Also, just like, commenting, subscribing, and make sure you hit that notification bell, because that helps us spread the word about the Second Amendment and helps us spread the word about what's going on here in the state of California and the various infringements that are going on within the US. So as always, thanks guys for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.